At this time, I'd like to introduce Congressman Todd Rokita, Indiana's 4th Congressional District. Congressman Rokita is a strong voice in ensuring that America has an effective, strong but effective foreign policy, one that makes sure that our military is always set up for success, our veterans are taken care of when they come home, and as I mentioned earlier, as I was introducing Congresswoman Tenney, part of that effort certainly is ensuring the right path forward as it relates to Iran. So I introduce and welcome Congressman Todd Rokita for as much time as he may consume.
Well, I thank the gentleman from New York for yielding and for hosting this special order. In my humble opinion, Speaker, the people of New York are lucky to have a gentleman like this representing them, and I know it's the highest honor of his life as well. I also with my good friend from Kentucky, Mr. Barr, for the remarks that he made. I think he has made, Mr. Zeldin, an excellent record of not only the premise of the deal, but the effect of the deal so far. And I agree with, Mr. Speaker, I agree with the gentleman from New York that Mr. Barr is going to be critical in leading the effort forward in sanctions, whether they are part of the JCPOA or not. So I thank the gentleman from Kentucky for his words tonight as well. You know, earlier this month, President Trump set a new direction for the United States, a direction of leadership. He made clear that we would no longer allow the Iranian government to continue to pursue nuclear weapons, continue funding terrorism, or threaten the very existence of our great friend Israel, the strongest ally we have in the region. President Trump made clear that unlike the previous administration, we will not reward Iran for chanting death to America, and we will not allow this terrorist regime to dictate our nation's foreign policy. You see, getting the Iran deal done was the only thing the previous administration cared about. Think about that, just getting the deal done. I think we all remember that sentiment around here. Getting the deal done, no matter how terrible, was the only thing the previous administration cared about. We had to get the deal done. We had to get the deal done, as bad as it was. And it's unlike our current president, who has demanded action to hold Iran accountable, guarantee our national security, and protect Israel and our allies across the world, night and day. And I appreciate the president's leadership on this and other matters. You know, the United States should never have signed on to the deal in the first place, Mr. Speaker, because it was a bad deal. It gave access to $150 billion US. It allowed the Iranians to continue their ballistic missile research, and it contains a sunset provision that will allow the Iranians to return immediately to enriching uranium without consequence. Now, even then, Secretary of State John Kerry said that, quote, some of the $150 billion will end up in the hands of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps or other entities, some of which are labeled terrorists, unquote. That was our Secretary of State's direct quote, admitting that some of this $150 billion was going to get to terrorists. Now, there is no situation in which the United States should allow money to get to terrorists. Hoosiers that I represent see this quite clearly. Surely the Americans that the rest of us represent see the same thing. But then President Obama and Secretary Kerry allowed this to happen, and were cheered on, in fact, by many in this very chamber and many in the Senate. Now, this year alone, Iran has tested their ballistic missiles at least 3 times, and they tested a rocket space launch vehicle. Now, in their most recent test in September, they used a ballistic missile with the potential range to hit Israel, the only stable democracy in the region. And as Mr. Barr pointed out, Mr. Speaker, intercontinental ballistic missiles aren't even meant for Israel. They're meant to come here. They're meant to go to our other allies. A bad deal indeed. The threats Iran poses are truly extreme: terrorist, nuclear arms race, and continued threats to America and its neighbors. Unfortunately, we cannot go back in time and stop then President Obama from signing this disastrous Iran nuclear deal. And by the way, it's signing in the theoretical sense, because was also right, Mr. Speaker, when he said that this was a set of papers that really had no signatories. It was an executive action by then President Obama, for sure. But all in all, no matter what the semantics, a bad deal. But we can move forward by creating tough sanctions, like Mr. Speaker, Mr. Barr was pointing out, and making sure Iran is held accountable. And that starts tonight with the work that Lee Zeldin and other members of Congress are doing. Mr. Speaker, I thank the gentleman from New York again for yielding me this time. I thank him for his leadership. Mr. Speaker, let's get it right this time. Let's make sure Iran doesn't become the threat that the previous administration has allowed it to become. And I yield back.
Well, thank you, Congressman Rokita, for being here, for your important words.